France in 2015. We didn't have this ecosystem. We went out there and, we followed, the book, as you may, and got to somewhere. I'd say 7 years on, we've got to somewhere. But the difference now is this. The young people who went there this time around, they've got the ecosystem of the new Africa-France Summit around them. They've got the support structure. They were looked after really well for the entire time they were there, treated as any high-level delegation would have been treated. Beyond that, there's a lot of support from the French ecosystem in each of the countries where they are from, be it through the embassies or through the Alliance Française, but even going a bit further and looking at the new initiatives which have been deployed alongside this summit. If you go to the new Africa-France Summit web pages online, you'll find initiatives that have been set up specifically for different industries. I know of two in particular for the creative industry, and you can go online and check those out.
We can choose to teach what we teach differently. And for me, that's what I decided to do, even in the system that there were. When I was in Makere, my classes, I was very intentional on how I taught my classes. Yeah. I opted to be a facilitator as opposed to a lecturer. Yeah. Two, I allowed co-learning. We learn together. Yeah. I am not the epitome of knowledge. Yeah. If you have learned something and you think it's beneficial, let's share it. That's the second thing, that come to the realization that knowledge is not housed in one brain. Yeah. Knowledge is God is gracious. Yeah. Each one of us has a portion of knowledge about some of the things. When you trigger people to go and search, they will go. When you trigger people to sit back and depend on you, they will sit back. I'll say, trigger people to go and search. Wow. You will teach the same things, but the outcomes will be different. My final shot to those of us that are very passionate about education and want to change, when it is so painful with what you're doing, you'll do what I'm doing at Refactory. You'll choose to go against status quo. And I hope history will judge you fairly. When that time comes, I can say, yeah, I've trained about 300 people at Refactory. We've trained about, it's not only me, we've trained about 300 people at Refactory. We have about an average of about 70 to 83% placement. I can say I'm happy. I'm a very happy person because I know for a fact that the current placement rate for fresh university graduates is below 10%. So for me to be at 83%, yeah, I feel I can walk on the clouds, but I won't. There's still a lot of work to be done. Yeah. And so each one of us has an individual responsibility for those of us that are in the education space. Yeah. And hopefully, each one of us can then create that summative change that we need to see. Wow. Thank you.
it helps you become the trendsetter. You know, humankind is set in a way that they will always have a thing for the pioneer of things.
Yeah.
So we see it, if you think about these big corporations we see in Uganda and how they advertise and the different promotions they bring, you will somehow the target market will always have the pioneer front of mind. So for me, creativity, that is how important it is, because you will get the masters, you will be an A-lister on the papers. But if you do not know how to channel, because there is not one company in the arts or in business, as we know it, there's not a company that hires more than 10 people, and all of them are not creative. There is always creativity in a company.
I come from the Pearl of Africa. It's a beautiful country with beautiful nature. To me, it really inspires me and motivates me. And actually, in one of my tags on my clothing, especially on my jeans, you see those lines that appear on the back pockets of the jeans. When I was doing my internship in Paris, I happened to go to a fashion museum where I read a few books, you know, about fashion designers and their names and about their creations and things like that. There are signs on jeans like the Wrangler, the Lee jeans. All those jeans have signs on the pockets. And before I went to Paris, I was doing that already because I was drawing my inspiration. I used to love geography. And the Ugandan, East African geography was really very interesting to me. You know, knowing that I come from the Great Lakes, East African Rift Valley, that's why you see those lines on my jeans. I brought two theories, because they are just theories about the creation of the Great East African Rift Valley. So I put those. So it's the nature and the music that really inspires me and motivates me.
It is a creative industry talk. My name is Okila, and of course, my guest this morning has been around the world. A man who has worked in the investment banking sector. He's an engineer by profession. He is a ballroom dancer, the British 2015 champion of the ballroom dance. And of course, he's a creative thinker. He's a man who is trying to turn life of the farmers in northern Uganda around and trying to give them meaning creatively using energy, electricity created from food waste to useful stuff. Ladies and gentlemen all across the world, the one and only engineer, Peter Odokonyero. In fact, his name is Peter Benhur Odokonyero Nyeko. Peter, welcome to the show. I had to get this right today.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
You're welcome to the program. And of course, I like the new look of you. Today, we're not seeing you on, the suit and Mr. Uganda, the tie. I think some people are going to be heavily confused. of how creative you have become to come onto the Creative Industry Talk. How are you today?
Awesome, awesome. Bonjour à tous, sabah al khair, buenos dias, bon dia to everyone.
Wow, wow.
Zhao Shanghao.
All right. So
Yes.
Peter has just returned from France and is fresh from Montefiore with French President Emmanuel Macron, and of course many people there from Africa, from the new Africa-French relationships and the conference that happened in France just a week ago. And today on the program, we're focusing on that discussion. If you would put the topic up there for everyone to see all across the world, this is House of Talent Television. We're talking about the new Africa-France Summit 2021. What does it really mean for Uganda creative industry? And that will be the very first start of this interview, Pete.
Awesome. Thank you very much. It's great to be here again.
Yeah.
Awesome.
You're welcome.
Yes. And we were great and grateful, with my colleagues to have spent a few days in France, in Paris and Montpellier. Montpellier is on the south of France. It's basically on the Mediterranean Sea. Lovely weather. It felt like being in Kampala, actually, with at least 21 others who went with us from Uganda, from different industries, including the creative industry space.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. So we want to just dive into that conversation, Peter,
Yes.
today, just to sort of understand, what does this new Africa, France relationship means to the African creative industry? And to start from the Africa perspective, then we'll narrow it down to East Africa and we'll bring it down to Uganda. What does this really mean to us? What is France saying to us?
Ultimately, creativity comes down to the building blocks of life.
Yeah.
Comes down to understanding.
Yeah.
Comes down to communication, to conversation, and to understanding each other. Understanding each other's customs, each other's cultures, each other's best points, each other's needs for encouragement or otherwise, and each other's inspirations. So one way of looking at it is saying, great, how do we communicate? What language do we use? Do we speak to each other in French, in France? Do we speak to each other in an African language in Africa? Do our French colleagues learn our languages? Do we learn their languages? Do we learn how to eat their food? Do they learn how to eat our food? Do we learn how to make it? Do we find interesting ways to find similarities between us? What do our grandmothers teach us? Could it be the same thing? What do our grandfathers teach us? Could it be the same thing as well? Yeah. And finding within that, within our cultures and traditions, a lot of similarities that we can build on. And that's one way of looking at it, kicking off. But then also, when we think of it from the other side, we also have similar challenges. We're all on Mother Earth. So the environment is important to all of us. Yeah. The future is important to all of us. The climate is important to all of us. And, little children who are being born and growing, we all want to make sure they live in a better world than we're in now. And so these are some of the few similarities we have in common, and I'm sure there's so many more. So what creativity is so important, and the industry of creativity is so important, is because it allows us to explore our similarities in many ways and accentuate them and build our relationships around those.
Wow. This is the Creative Industry Talk. My name is Okila. Mr. Peter Nyeko is in the studio. He's fresh from France, and we're talking about the new Africa-France Summit 2021 and what it means for the creative industry in Africa. And Peter has just given us a whole different, perspective to this. New Africa, what does this really mean to Ugandan creatives, if you will break it down? We want to just, first before the Ugandan, but today, East Africa.
Indeed.
East Africa has a few spots that has a relationship with France. We are not necessarily a very deep French-speaking countries, but we are part of the African continent, which France is saying this is our we need to have a new African relationship with us. What does this really mean to the Anglo-speaking countries in East Africa when France brings and starts this kind of conversation?
Awesome. What's interesting is, even if you go to England, if you go to the United Kingdom, and you look at the coat of arms of the royal family, there is there written, Dieu est mon droit. It's written in French.
Okay. Dieu est mon droit.
Dieu est mon droit.
Dieu est mon droit.
Yeah. So it's like, God and my right. Yes. And so already, even as we speak English, there is so much of France in the English that we do speak. Okay. We tell each other bon appetit when we're eating.
Yes.
And many other things. We say au revoir when we want to see each other again.
Yes.
But it's more than just that. In the end, Africa is a wonderful continent which has had interesting histories. The histories may have been joyful. They could be more joyful in other areas. But what's interesting is whether we look at history from one side of Africa or another side of Africa, there's a lot we can learn from history. And there's a lot we can work with what we know from history to make the future even brighter. And that's what I see from this. There is so much that we here in Uganda, for example, have learned from our brothers and sisters in the more French-speaking parts of Africa, especially when it comes down to culture, fashion, music, and so on. I mean, over the years, as Uganda's own music industry was being built, I'm pretty sure there was a lot of music coming in from the Congo and other places, Pepe Kale, all these guys, before we had our own people on this side coming up with the music. So with music already, we've seen that conversation. With fashion, we still see that conversation all across. My shirt's made in Kampala, but the tailor was born in Congo. So, I mean, that conversation is already happening as we speak. We just want to take that conversation deeper and let it flow both ways. There's also a lot from the East African way of doing things that can be shared on the other side as well. The entrepreneurial way of life and a few other things as well. So that conversation is something which, starts off in Africa, hence, new in Africa, but it also flows in to France and other places because France has a lot of Africa in it as well. Not just in the last 100 years, but if you go historically way back, think of the Africans, who were part of the Roman ecosystem as France became part of the Roman Empire. Think about the relationship going back, way back to those days, thousands of years ago. So it's not just 100 years.
This relationship has been there before.
It has been there. It's been there before, yes.
Now, Peter, we just want to encourage everyone to, go onto our YouTube, subscribe, like, share, fan wide. We're live on Facebook. We're live on Twitter for those who are on the move. Twitter is live for you right there, and of course on our website. So any of those platforms that you're watching the program from, please go and share it far and wide. We're going to have a great conversation with Peter, and we're just trying to sort of like lay a ground to, what does this, New Africa, France 2021 summit means to us going forward. Peter, you've broken this from the Africa perspective. We want you to just, and you've talked about it from the East African perspective. Let's bring it home.
All right.
Home is Uganda. And Uganda has been the home and the host to Alliance Francaise and the French embassy for many years. And the relationship has been working on. Back in the days, we used to have a lot of the French, Alliance Francaise and UGCS, which is the Gautier Foundation. And all of this about promoting creativity, culture, and beginning to foster relationship for, cross-cultural learning, for peace building. What does this mean when the French people and the president begin to say New Africa? What does it mean for Uganda and the creative industry?
Awesome. So new is an interesting word, you know. New is rebirth. You could think about it that way. Rejuvenation, and new could be starting with where you are and discovering more within that
Yeah.
and expanding upon it.
Yeah.
And so we're saying it's amazing, you know. Many of us who are above a certain age will remember a day when there were lots of cars on Uganda's roads that were made in France. Do you remember what those cars were called?
Yes, Renault
And
and the Peugeot.
that one in
Yes.
French, what do they call it?
Peugeot.
Yes.
The 504,
Yes.
the 402, the 204.
Indeed, indeed. So,
Yes, yes, yes.
there's enough of that
Yes.
in there already.
Yeah.
But when we come to today,
Yeah.
go to all the restaurants around Kampala,
Yeah.
coffee shops, you'll find croissants
Yeah.
all around Kampala. So I mean, it's already changing as we see.
Yeah.
And we love that. But we're saying, what more is there? If we think about it from a different angle, we talked about creative industry.
Yes.
And creative industry, creativity and industry
Yes.
goes beyond fashion, goes beyond music, goes beyond dance,
Yeah.
goes to the building blocks of industry itself.
Yeah, yeah.
Because industry itself is creativity
Yeah.
made real.
Yeah.
And if we think about the creative industries
Yeah.
of France, or the industries which are of a French origin,
Yeah.
that have brought their creativity to Uganda. I mean, we know very well that very many Ugandan young people went to study about, engineering of a certain type, and there's a huge investment from a number of large French companies in Uganda,
Yeah.
linked a lot
Yeah.
to, other industries,
Yes.
whether you're thinking it from the point of view of energy,
Yeah.
or you're thinking it from the point of view of water,
Yeah.
or from the point of view of logistics,
Yes.
or from the point of view of infrastructure and
Yes.
roads.
Yes.
When you think about it from that angle as well now,
Yeah.
you go, how big is France's investment
In
conversation with Uganda?
Okay, that's a very interesting conversation to have.
And when we think about it from that point of view,
Yeah.
is it a fleeting investment, or is it an investment for the ages? If it is an investment for the ages, if that investment will be there for generations,
Yeah.
our conversations should also be built on building blocks that can go on for generations.
Yeah.
Therefore, the communication has to be renewed
Yes.
in many ways.
Yes.
We have to find new and more interesting ways
Yeah.
to understand each other even more.
Yeah.
Who knows, maybe I speak to someone in French, in France, in French,
Yeah.
and they speak back to me in Luo.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll try something like that.
Yes.
Who knows? Maybe I'll go to France
Yeah,
and
yeah.
have Luombo
Yeah.
in Paris, and
Yeah.
they'll come to Kampala and have croissants in Kampala.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, we already have, Ugandan fashion designers based in
Yes,
France,
yes,
don't we? There's a
Yes,
lovely
we know.
lady
We
there.
have Stella Tal based in France. We have another lady based in France, and
Yes.
Stella actually has been teaching in a French school
Awesome,
Yeah.
awesome, indeed.
for these years, and she's been teaching people our culture in a preschool.
Yes.
and of course teaching also people in community.
Indeed, indeed.
Yes, and we've hosted her on creative industry quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And then down the road here,
Yeah.
we've got the Alliance Française,
Yes.
around the corner, we've
Yes.
got the École Française, but
Yes.
many Ugandan schools are teaching French,
Yes.
Yes. And Ugandan universities as well are teaching French.
Yes.
And a lot of our professional public sector servants
Yeah.
in different sectors
Yeah.
of government
Yeah.
are quite fluent in French. I've had conversations with people in agriculture who speak
Yes.
French as well as you could possibly imagine,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth. So the building blocks are there.
Yeah.
But now we need to say, great, Uganda is a very young country.
Yeah.
We've got great building blocks.
Yeah.
How can we build on from these building blocks and involve these young people who are the future of this country in this conversation?
Wow.
And that's where it becomes really interesting.
Wow.
And that's what takes us to the speech which was made by His Excellency the President of France in Ouagadougou in 2017,
Yeah.
which went on to what happened a couple of weeks ago in France, with people coming together, conversations being frank, honest, respectful, hopeful, and positive. And that's really exciting from that angle.
Yeah.
If you go and follow on Twitter or on the internet, and just Google, in English, because all those websites now are in English as well, even though they're obviously in French as well. But you Google New Africa France Summit, okay? When you Google that, you'll find so many interesting websites linked to that. And it takes you to a lot of the interesting initiatives that were birthed out of the redefining of the conversation that started in Ouagadougou a few years ago, and that have been augmented by the deeper conversations had the other week, where we had a number of Ugandans actually on stage, both ladies and gentlemen, but others from across the continent. And now, for those in the traditional creative industries, as well as any other industries which are creative, because they all are, there are so many things that you can find there which can help you be part of improving this conversation while moving forward with your hopes and dreams as colleagues building the hopeful future for this continent.
Wow. Wow. Peter, I want you to hold it right there. We're going to take a break. And when we come back, Peter and I will dive deeper and dig deeper into what this necessarily means. And furthermore, we want to understand this new, Africa-France summit and the relationship that is being built. Where does it lead us? How do we benefit from there? Peter scratched the surface, but we're coming back after this break and, digging deep into what does it mean for a traditional creative person here, from agricultural point of view as a creative, to, textile point of view as a creative, to a policy point of view as a person who makes policy for creative thinking or for creative spaces, as well as, from the political angle, what does it really mean if we're thinking creatively? Stay right there. We'll be right back after this break. This is the Creative Industry Talk. What happens typically if a business person comes to you and they don't have a story completely? Do you have to go and start creating this story with them? Do you guide them as a creative consultant? What do you do in that process when the customer is absolutely green about what they are talking about, but you need to create a product for them? What do you do always?
In my approach,
Yeah.
I usually have standard questions.
Yeah.
More like my frequently asked questions around product development. That includes even from brand development when creating logos. Yeah. So I have, if they don't have, everybody has a story.
Yeah.
It's just that some people don't know how to capture their story.
Yeah.
So at that moment, I'm like a brand journalist trying to dig and harvest that story out of that person if they don't know they have it. So I will ask them this set of questions. By the time we are done, they will realize, oh, I actually have a story. I just didn't think of it from that perspective. Just like now, I asked you, where do you come from? Yeah. And if I dig into your Lyra origins, before
which is now Yam,
before you know it, which school did you go to? I mean, how did you grow up? Before you know it, then we will end up to your idea, how you got the idea. There's a whole bunch of questions that can dig us close to creating the story. Yeah. So it's not very hard. It's not as hard. For me, I usually have a default set of questions ready, and every person answers these questions differently, and that gives them their story.
Can we hear some more from Jaja? Of course, Jaja is going to play for us that song, Kitenge. You've heard it, the sound, beautiful, and we're going to dive into how Kitenge is going to make it to the world stage as planned by Latif Shah.
Abamina bajala mwena naddala bali erudda eri mu North London kyembakuutira kiri kimu butekuwagiza wadde embeera za korona bangi zatutagula. Kakati tuve mu mayumba kitengi bateyi n'ensonze bumale ate nga tetusaanidde niyabagamba okwambala engoye z'emivumba tujja kwambala bitengi byokka. Designer Latifu Uganda omurasita owakabye yatunga mu nnyonyi Maliki Jeni ne Hawa abo basibi banviiri alo tujja kuba nabo. Anifa wa makeup Mariamu yedikoleetako ne Popini ebyokulya bingi nnyo ebyekifiirika Madamu Sara Shoshi ebitaddemu omukono Olivia Katarini n'alima Maka manyinga owulira kolono otwambala ebitengi byokka kolono otwambala bitengi byokka.
Talk. My name is Okila, and in the studio is engineer Peter Benhur Odokonyero Nyeko. He is also the proprietor of, rather the CEO of Manduli's Energy, and of course Ripal and Chakula. These are all brands under him, and the creative space is what Peter does. Peter is a dancer and is an Arabic teacher. He speaks French and he speaks Luo. He speaks English fluently and he speaks Spanish. Now, these are all facets of creativity in one man. Who is better fit to be on this show? And he was one of the people who were in France speaking in French with the French president representing Uganda. And of course, on summit that we had in France a few just days back or weeks back. Peter, welcome back to the program. We want to go back from the point where we're talking about, we're discussing the New Africa France Summit 2021. Yes. Now, the opening of the conference, let's start from there. What does it really mean for creativity in Uganda? We saw the French president and the French people open that summit with a dance from the African lady and one seemingly looking like Italian. And then the African dance was on stage and everything was about that. And in that moment, what was it trying to communicate to Africa and to, you know, the creative industry?
Thank you so much. I mean, being African and being in that room, you know, you could say it was interesting, you know, it was vibrant and it was welcoming. And anyone who had come in and may have felt a bit cold warmed up. The ice was broken. It was possible to now be open, fully open, and feel when you open an event with the kind of music that makes you move, get off your feet, and sweat a little bit. The conversation thereafter is fully open. Yeah. Nothing's held back. So that was very interesting from that point of view. But also the fact that those who may have been in France for the first time suddenly thought, wait, I'm from Chad, I'm in France, there's a Chadian musician on stage. Or I'm from Bujumbura, I'm in France, there's a Bujumburan dancer on stage. And thinking, wow, I feel seen, I feel heard, I feel welcomed, I feel at home. Yeah. That's the message which everyone could basically feel. But at the same time, the fact that you had people from France who are not from an African origin joining in and having even more fun than we're used to having to that same music meant we're all one family. And that was wonderful. And it made a difference because it was a very young audience, an audience where I may have been one of the few people who were not as young. That made a difference there as well. But when we got to the point where the head of state welcomed everyone and had a stage with very young people on it and very open conversations in French and in English on that stage, which you can all see online. You can go to the website, of New Africa France Summit. You can go to the website of the Elysee Palace, or the entire 3.5 hour, big event at the end of the summit is all there online. But you can see everything else as well as the other conversations. But early in the morning, because this happened in the evening to close it, but in the morning and in the early afternoon, you had different sections of the summit where you had the business people having their mini summits, and a Ugandan spoke there. You had the creative industries having their conversations, and a Ugandan spoke there as well. You had the environmental side of things, and you had the sports side of things. So now you see business, environment, sports, creativity. That's what makes it so interesting. Everything that we are really vibrant with as a continent and as a world going forward.
Wow.
Yeah.
Peter, so that moment communicated connectivity according
Yes.
to you. That moment communicated that we are welcome. That moment communicated that the things are starting from a new, perspective. I mean, it was a moment for reflection for very many people, including myself, when I was looking into that. Earlier on, we had had a series of events all across, I think, Uganda, when they were preparing toward this day. And one of the things that struck me most was a film that was screened, in preparation leading to the conference. It was about Don't Film. The film was titled Don't Film Me. And when we watched this film, there was this scene in the film where, the director and the producer comes and he pulls out the sweets and the chocolate and give it to the children, and the children speak, and then somebody comes and says, why do you give them the chocolate? Did you ask them if they want the chocolate? What if they want cassava? What if they want this? What if they want this? And that moment simply just came out alive. And we were having a conversation in that moment and saying, look, when we hear now the new Africa-France relationship, and looking at the past where, the Western world would always just come and give. They assume that this is what you need and then just give you. From the creative point of view, they would come here to come and write the story and tell the story of an African man or woman without talking and getting their perspective. The French president and the French people seems to be saying, no, we now want this story to be told by you. And that's what I saw on the stage. And that's what I saw, the choreography and, the dance, the culture that was being fused on there was telling a lot of things in the background. Where does this leave us with our, the previous mindsets of this is how it is to the new mindset that is trying to be shaped at the moment by the French people?
What's most interesting is on that journey that we went to and in the conversations that we had, the first thing is New Africa.
Yeah.
We felt the New Africa so much because we got to meet other Africans who we may have not met otherwise.
Yeah.
Africa is not as connected and interconnected as it could be.
Yeah.
So to have an opportunity to meet other entrepreneurs, other creatives, other young people from other African countries, where you spend a week together and interact and share and learn and build on for a better future was even bigger than any conversations that were had with France.
Yeah.
What was great there was you'll find a difference, you'll find a change from the relationships that were built amongst the Africans who had actually gone.
Yeah.
that's kind of one way of looking at it. Secondly, obviously, as you did say, at the event, it was no holds barred. There was every bit of honesty. There was a lot of truth. There was a lot of understanding and coming to terms with the more difficult parts of the history of this relationship.
Yeah.
And it was crucial in that it is now called the New Africa-France Summit. And it follows the alphabetical order. Though previously, many years ago, it was the other way around.
It was France-Africa relationship.
Indeed.
Yes.
So you could say the focus is more on following the alphabetical order now.
Yes. I see where you're coming. I see the point.
Yes.
Peter, that said, does that now mean that from a creative point of view, down here in Uganda,
Yes.
we can now begin to think about what are our creative, works here, businesses that we also start here? Can it begin to go and open up stalls in France? Can Ugandan, creative people also, Africa creative people also go and invest in France? Because there's been the trade balance between, France and Africa, to be specific, and in Uganda, is more of the France investing in Uganda and less of Uganda investing in France. Now, I want to look at from that point of view. If we're thinking now creatively, and there are products, of course, we now have people like Stella Artois in France. Does that mean Artois can come up with a factory or, set up a factory in France? Does that mean that Pfizer Chiwewa, that was part of, the delegation, can set up, a festival of a Baimba festival in France and run it in France without any limitation? Does that mean like Dawoodi, Karunji and the many likes, and yourself, can you go and start a farm in France and also, build your product there and run your product? Did you see that sense and that kind of sense in the conversation? I know some conversation on stage was quite tensed.
Yes.
I saw some people from the Western part who were quite very tough at the moment and the French president remained calm, and everything was like, okay, we take this from you and we continue to, build this relationship. So that moment that was very tense of some great exchange of ideas on stage were quite very telling, and it came out as a way of some people feeling still hungry about some of the things that happened in the past. Others saying, no, this is it. This is the moment. This is the new Africa France. We're moving forward. What did you feel while sitting there? As an investor, that's number one. As a creative mind in France, as a man who actually acts in the theater, what opportunities did you see that the creative art can actually, present itself and do in France?
Interesting. The conversation is getting quite wide now.
Yes.
But I'll go back to what you started with.
Yes.
One thing we all know about France is, France is happy, joyful, and proud to be France. That's the first thing we can learn from France.
Yeah.
France knows all about France. France celebrates France. France celebrates its history, its cuisine, its language, its music, its culture. So when we want to have a conversation with France, it helps if we also come from a point of celebrating our history, our culture, our heritage, our food. Then we can have it, because the conversation involves exchange.
Yes.
So we have to have
ideas.
something to bring forward. And if we don't yet understand ourselves fully, if we don't yet celebrate ourselves fully, it's difficult to begin to share what we ourselves don't yet understand. It takes us back to earlier conversations we had about what is Uganda, what is being Ugandan.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to, first of all. France is very sure what France is. I can be comfortable about that.
Yeah.
You will never find anywhere in the world a Bordeaux wine done the way it's done in Bordeaux.
Yeah.
You know that.
Yes. That's true.
You will never find camembert cheese done the way they do camembert in France. Have we got to a point where we can say, do we have a bucotto pie, which is the only way to cook that pie in the whole world?
Yeah.
So when we go to Montpellier,
Yeah.
we can get something from there and share with them that. So that's one way of looking at it. We've got to focus a bit more and really learn to celebrate ourselves. You know, can we have our equivalent of what is celebrated at the Louvre in Paris?
Yeah.
Can really celebrate that heritage to that much? That's important from that traditional creative side of things.
Yeah.
But we go to the other side as well. I mean, of course, you know, I am very confident that Ugandan businesses in any sector who are able to dream,
Yeah.
plan, and realize can fly to France and invest in any part of France as well. I mean, of course, you've already mentioned a few businesses in the creative industry already who already invested in France.
Yeah.
But in other industries as well, that can happen. In the knowledge industry, you know, in many others.
Yeah.
What makes it even more interesting now is investment is not only physical, you know, it's not only in hardware.
Yeah.
Now you've got the internet. You've got developers in Uganda, developers elsewhere who can develop Ugandan apps that could be used in France. But now it shouldn't be only about we create something, we put it on a ship, and we ship it out, and we get paid for it.
Yeah.
That's, when we go new, we've got to think beyond that now and
Yeah.
go, okay, let's not say, all right, great, let's have something for them to buy.
Yeah.
No, let it be a conversation as well from that point of view.
Yeah.
And let's say, is there something we can take from our learnings of how we have overcome some of our challenges in Uganda? Is there something we can take from that to invest in a part of France that may be facing similar challenges that could learn from how we solve these challenges?
Yeah.
I'm sure with a bit of research we can find a few areas where we can share.
Yeah.
The same way France has been able to share with us so much on the technological side, in oil and gas, you know, in infrastructure, in water services, and so much more.
And that said, Peter, I
Yeah.
just want to take you deeply on that part
Yeah.
of the conversation. So, was that the sense that you picked from there while you attended the New Africa-France Summit 2021, when the French president was talking, when all the presenters were on stage and talking? Did you see that as a person from Uganda, from the creative, that you think this is the creative side that we need? Did you see the sense of what you're talking about?
What's exciting is
Yeah.
I saw it, I felt it, and you know, I could see others also acting on it.
Yeah.
What's interesting from that point of view was those of us involved in business
Yeah.
went a few days earlier. We were there on Monday. We had events on Monday and Tuesday within the premises of the French government. Mm-hmm. We had another summit on the Wednesday and the Thursday. So we had a lot of time to interact with business people from France. We had the opportunity to book meetings with them in advance.
Yeah.
We had opportunities to share our profiles.
Yeah.
And learn more about how they do things, but also go towards a point where we can actually do business together with them.
Yeah.
Not just in France, but also in other parts of Africa
Yeah.
where doing business with French colleagues would make a massive difference. So all our opportunity was there on the table. It just came down to saying, great, are we able to prepare in advance, go there, learn how to communicate emotionally, through word, through exchange of culture, but build from that, you know, our needs to make a difference through business and otherwise. And I think there's so much of that which was there. Yeah. Not only do I think, I'm pretty sure, because but I know it takes months, which started way earlier than this, I would say it's the same as my interaction business in other countries as well.
Yeah.
It takes time to build something, but you've got to have patience, confidence, and a willingness to learn and continuously improve and build.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing that can happen there. But the difference today is this. With the ecosystem that this summit has given us, when my colleagues and I went to France in 2015, we didn't have this ecosystem. We went out there and, we followed, the book, as you may, and got to somewhere. I'd say 7 years on, we've got to somewhere. But the difference now is this. The young people who went there this time around, they've got the ecosystem of the new Africa-France Summit around them. They've got the support structure. They were looked after really well for the entire time they were there, treated as any high-level delegation would have been treated. Beyond that, there's a lot of support from the French ecosystem in each of the countries where they are from, be it through the embassies or through the Alliance Française, but even going a bit further and looking at the new initiatives which have been deployed alongside this summit. If you go to the new Africa-France Summit web pages online, you'll find initiatives that have been set up specifically for different industries. I know of 2 in particular for the creative industry, and you can go online and check those out. And there are incubators where you can go with your idea, build it up, and get it to a point where it's robust and can last a distance. So if we all know Yves Saint Laurent, French brand, could we get a Ugandan brand in fashion going on to one of these incubators and accelerators, and building up, getting to a point where they have strengthened themselves as a brand and as a business, and they're able to access funding as part of that as well. So there are 2 different things you'll find on the website, which includes support, incubation, funding, and further investment. And it's being led by none other than, the French Development Agency, Agence Française de Développement, which is, wow, it's the same entity that's supporting, infrastructure, roads, and so on. That same entity is now supporting the creative industry. That means so much.
Okay. I want to just ask you one more question, Pete, before we go for a break. You're obviously breaking this down, and to everyone out there, we're talking to Engineer Peter Nyeko, who was at the new Africa-French Summit 2021 on the invitation of the French embassy in Uganda and the French government. And of course, they came back with a different perspective, which we need to dive into to understand the different perspective that will allow us to shape the attitude and perception of the local people. 2, must be in communication. They must be talking. What is your say? What is your comment about the new Africa-France relationships? Have a say, send us a comment or kisses or disses, and let us know what your thoughts are. Peter is breaking down what he has seen at the conference, and for the next couple of days, we're definitely going to be discussing the new Africa-France relationship. What does it mean for us in the creative industry? Every sector in Uganda or anywhere in the world needs a creative mind. A creative mind is a person who thinks about something, think about the solution to the problem, creates the product that is needed in the market for us to be able to move forward. It is a solution-based. So if we're talking about the new Africa, then we've got to be able to make sure that this is actually something that we're all working together to make sure it works. Peter, coming back, if you have been in a relationship where you felt like the relationship in the past wasn't okay, some would say, take for example, if you felt like the relationship in the past was very aggressive or was quite abusive to you or quite demeaning to you, and now the relationship is changing and it's beginning to look like no, we're starting from a new fresh page, forget about that. We saw that on the stage when the French president actually apologized. He started this in Ouagadougou sometime, and then again this time around he apologized. And some of the young people took it upon themselves to say, this is the only chance we have to talk to the president. of a different country like France. You know, you don't quite get that in the US, you know, in the UK or any other countries that are quite very eminently placed in Africa. It was something different. But then again, there's an argument that maybe because he's young, maybe because the other one don't understand as the young, maybe because the older generation don't understand the younger generation. What does that communicate to us? What was the feeling like in the room when it says, we are sorry for whatever has happened in the past, for whatever our ancestors have done, for whatever our background has done, for whatever our relationship has been, we are sorry. How did the people who are seated in that place, the young black Africans, look at it, particularly from the point of witness as Peter?
Awesome. So what's interesting is we shouldn't think of history as 50 years or as 500 years.
Yeah.
Let's think of history as history. And if we look back only 50 years, we can see it from only one angle. If we look back 500 years, we can see from a different angle.
Yeah.
If we look back 5,000 years, it's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
Remember the time when you may have been a pharaoh?
Yeah.
Right here where we're sitting right now.
Yeah.
When the superpower
Yeah.
was the country,
Yes.
the civilization around these waters called the Nile.
Yeah.
Imagine if there was a new France Africa summit then,
Yes, yes, yes.
hosted by the pharaoh.
Yes, yes, yes.
What was the relationship then?
Yeah.
There are cycles in history.
Of course.
And we can't, I mean, this is my opinion, but I believe we can't focus only on one part of history
Yeah.
and forget that there has been cycles for quite a while.
Yeah.
I went all the way back to ancient Egypt, but we can go even closer to the Roman Empire. And we can think of the Africans within the Roman legion
Yes.
who were part of the conquest of France and other places. We could think of the Africans who were part of the conquest of most of Europe during the time when, you know, we had the Moors.
Yeah.
And the Saracens, you know, in Spain and in Italy, which is kind of near France as well.
Yeah.
History is really interesting. And we've got to think of it and say, great, ultimately, you know, whatever happened 50, 500 or 5,000 years ago, let's look at it holistically and let's look at it with hope. Let's look at it with honesty. And let's look at it with the point of view of building a brighter future where the kids who are yet to be born are able to interact and communicate in a beautiful way. And that's what can build the kind of world we all want to see. And that's what I feel we may have had a bit of a building block of during those days. And it may have been a breath of fresh air for that first step. It is always a first step.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work to be done beyond this. People who went have to communicate with each other. People who hosted have to communicate with those who went. People who went have to, you know, people have to figure out how can we take this spark and turn it into a flame and sustain it and build it even bigger and better going forward.
Yeah.
So a seed has been sown. It has been planted. And, you know, the doors have been opened. Now it's important for all of us to make the most of it moving forward.
Yeah.
There are still opportunities to make mistakes. Mistakes are still being made as we speak. But this honesty allows us to now look at things from a different point of view. More than just two people who have different cultures.
Yeah.
We'll be two people who appreciate each other's cultures and look for the similarities between our cultures and encourage each other to be proud of our heritage and move hand in hand that way. So that's part of what we can really take a look at, especially as we move forward. And there is so much more that can come of it as a result. But if we look at it only as a fantastic event, fun was had, good food was eaten, maybe some fundings got here and there, that's not the solid rock upon which we can build a sustainable future of hope.
Wow.
We've got to go beyond that. We've got to look inwards and say, great, when I saw the Louvre, what will I do with my museum? And say, when I learned about this institute that protects the French language and makes sure it's, understood and appreciated, what will I do with my own languages on this side? When I look at little things like that, when I now say, great, beyond that, what have I seen in Cote d'Ivoire that could benefit from the way I farm in Kirandongo? What have I seen in Mali that can benefit from the way I drill water in Karamoja? Can I share some of those things on that side as well? So we've got to look beyond just France and Uganda, or Uganda and Cote d'Ivoire, but look at ourselves as human beings. And look at ourselves as people who are all little newborn babies at some point. Identical in every way.
Wow.
With the same needs, same hopes, same dreams, and same fears. To simply stay alive and be happy. When we build from that newborn within each of us, we're able to build that new Africa, France, and Africa world relationship.
Wow. The creative industry is going to take a break, and when we come back, Peter and I will continue this conversation in the last part. We're talking about the new Africa France Summit 2021, those who attended it, those who represented us in France, those who represented us in Montefiore, and they are now back in Uganda. What was the learning, from that event? What happened there? What's the interpretation of that? Does it communicate what France is saying, that we need a new relationship with Africa? Does it communicate the reality of what we're actually talking about, the new Africa-France relationship? We're going to take a break, and when we come back, Peter and I will dig deep into that spot. And of course, we want to find out from you, what are your says, what are you saying, what are your comments, are you understanding? If you're not understanding, are you listening to some of the things Peter is talking about? For the next couple of weeks, we're going to have Peter come back here and interview one of those people one by one, just to know from them, what did they learn from there? And stay right there, we'll be right back after this. This is Creative Industry Talk on House of Talent Television. What happens typically if a business person comes to you and they don't have a story completely? Do you have to go and start creating this story with them? Do you guide them as a creative consultant? What do you do in that process when the customer is absolutely green about what they are talking about, but you need to create a product for them? What do you do always?
In my approach, I usually have standard questions. More like my frequently asked questions around product development. That includes even from brand development when creating logos. So I have, if they don't have, everybody has a story. It's just that some people don't know how to capture their story. So at that moment, I'm like a brand journalist trying to dig and harvest that story out of that person if they don't know they have it. So I will ask them this set of questions. By the time we are done, they will realize, oh, I actually have a story. I just didn't think of it from that perspective. Just like now, I asked you, where do you come from? And if I dig into your Lyra origins.
Yes.
Before
Which is
you
now
know,
Yam, yes.
But
yes,
yeah. Before you know it, which school did you go to?
Yeah.
I mean, how did you grow up? Before you know it, then we will end up to your idea, how you got the idea. There's a whole bunch of questions that can dig us close to creating the story.
Yeah.
So it's not very hard. It's not as hard. For me, I usually have a default set of questions in ready, and every person answers these questions differently, and that gives them their story.
Welcome back from that break. This is the Creative Industry Talk. My name is Okila, and this is House of Talent Television. In the studio is Engineer Peter Nyeko, who is the CEO of Mandali's Energy, and of course REPAL, which is renewable energy powering livelihood, renewable energy powering agriculture in agricultural livelihood. Peter will come and tell us about that. But I just wanted to know, he's also REPAL and he's also Chakula, and I just wanted to break that ice for you so you can know that from a creative point of view, Peter is actually a very serious person. Peter, welcome back to the program.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
How do I respond in France? When you say Mexico, what do I say next?
Merci beaucoup is basically thank you very much.
Yes. So how do I respond?
De rien.
De rien.
Yeah.
Okay. De rien, Peter.
Okay.
So a quick one. Just let's talk about REPAL. Can REPAL go to France? And what is REPAL for everyone? Can REPAL set up in France with this new new Africa-France relationship? Can REPAL also move to France and invest in France?
Thank you very much. REPAL is a company I work at, and I was blessed to be part of the team that set up. We already have quite strong partners from France. We work very closely with a French NGO. We work very closely with a French new energy company. And we are doing a lot of work right now in Uganda, and we are looking to do more work in other parts of Africa. But beyond that, what has birthed out of our work focusing on renewable energy powering agriculture and rural livelihoods has been discovering a way to innovate the possibility for electricity in a village to be cheaper than electricity in the city for industrial productive use.
Yeah.
That's an innovation that came out of an Africa-France synergy, incubated in Uganda, and now able to be shared with the world, enabling us to figure out that huge issue. Uganda's president talks a lot about the importance of low cost of electricity for industry. Yeah. He talks a lot about the importance of value addition. Yeah. This innovation that's been birthed from a France-Uganda ecosystem, from a France-Africa system, has helped realize that already. Yeah. And we'll be sharing that with other parts of the world. Yeah. But the digital parts of that and part of our digital ecosystem actually involves another startup which is Ugandan birthed, which is actually incubated in Toulouse in France and is already sharing a lot of knowledge at the forefront of the aerospace industry in Europe, including France. So there are no limits to that conversation.
Yes, yes.
And whatever you're doing, just make sure you do it to the very best of your ability. Make sure you do it so that it not only makes Uganda proud, it not only makes France happy, but it makes the whole world glad and grateful. And that's the angle that we're basically pushing. Every one of us has one idea that we may not think much of, but with the right ecosystem, with the right nurturing and the right building, can become something. So if our dear friend, our dear sister in France, in fashion, if she was going to set up a factory, she could even get the investment in Uganda to set up a factory in France. Who knows? What if she finds a way to interact with some of the big French brands out there? Some of the biggest French brands in fashion, in lifestyles, are already working with deep tech and engineering to engineer some of the stuff that they are doing. But who knows, maybe she's got ways to even interact with some of the stuff they're doing. Maybe they can set up joint ventures together. Who knows? Maybe she can come to one of her friends in Uganda who's built an arcade and invested 10 million euros already in Uganda from their own pocket. Maybe someone like that could even invest in such a Ugandan, enterprise based out of France, to then go from France to other parts of Africa. France is actually a very good base to be if you're going to now go and take a Ugandan innovation to West Africa. From a base in France, you can do that. If you're going to go to other parts of Africa, which may not speak French, because we found people there who speak Arabic, who speak Portuguese, who speak Afrikaans. Africa is more than just French and English. It's just got so many good things there, including Kiswahili. So, of course, I speaking more from my hat as a board member at l'École diplomatique de Kampala Primary School, I very much encourage young Ugandans, Ugandan parents, to encourage little kids growing up to just go online and figure out what are the official languages of the African Union. My prayer is learn all of them. Learn all of them, be fluent in all of them, so that you can be fully African. I want to go to Bloemfontein and speak in Afrikaans. I don't yet speak in Afrikaans, so I've got a job to do. I've got to learn Afrikaans so I can go to SA and be relaxed. I've got to improve my Portuguese so I can go to Playa in Cabo Verde. There's a great man from Cabo Verde in Uganda who's the head of FAO here. I want to go visit Antonio in his home and speak to his people in his language. I want to go, to Morocco and speak to them in Marabi. It would be great to be in an Africa where we don't need translators.
Wow.
Where, if you're in my village, we will shortwave. If I'm in your village, we'll medium wave. If we're in his village, we'll long wave. Either way, we'll communicate.
Yes.
And that would be so exciting. And that's the biggest thing I got out of these last 2 weeks. The fact that you can bring people together, they'll have one thing in common. Every one of us had a penchant for croissant. Penchant is another word in English that was taken from French, and we now own it in English, right? Like croissant. But everyone in there definitely had croissant for breakfast. I met some people, from Arabic-speaking Africa. I didn't speak to them in French. I just spoke Arabic only.
Wow.
I met those who speak Portuguese. I don't speak Portuguese, but I tried to meet them halfway and speak to them in Spanish, and they answered back in Portuguese. We made our way somehow, But
you were able to communicate.
Yes, but there's more we can do.
Wow.
Let's sort out that Kiswahili.
Wow.
Let's sort out that Arabic. Let's sort out that Portuguese. Let's sort out that Afrikaans. Let's be able to go and at least have the lingua franca, another French term that we now use in English, lingua franca, and communicate with each other in a way that allows us to share what is deepest. And one thing that made this possible is the fact that His Excellency, the President of France, spoke to everyone in the room in English as well as he was speaking in French to the colleagues who were on stage, the young people.
Yeah.
There were translators in the room who were able to translate different languages to those who had the headphones and so on. But I'll be honest, I was most grateful for my French teachers growing up because I didn't need those headphones. And I could get the meaning behind the meaning within the meaning.
That's the reason why we wanted the show today, because we wanted to start this conversation from the point of the person who understood, the person who speak French, the person who understood, not the person who was being translated for during New Africa France Summit. And that's the reason why we were thinking that we probably need to have Peter just do a series of interview with these guys. Everyone who has been in France coming back here, we want to hear, did they understand the magnitude of the weight placed upon their shoulder? That this is what we're saying we're going for now. As Africa, this is where we're going. And as France, this is what we want to do with you. What is our understanding of this? How does this begin to shape our perspective and attitude towards moving forward? Indeed. Sometimes we're stuck. There was a moment, Peter, on that stage when a man, sort of like grabbed a microphone from the president and spoke, and watching the video, and I said, and he felt like he was going native, sort of, and everything remained calm. I mean, you were processing this not from the English translation to France or French translation to English, but directly from there. What was your assessment of that? Of course, we know that he was trying to test the waters to see, am I free or I am not free? But also sometimes, to outgrow the things that we've been through in life, sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes we struggle to be in the future, but while trying to be who we are yesterday. It's very difficult to try to be who you want to be tomorrow, but at the same time in who you were yesterday. It's a very confusing statement right there, but we understood something. There was a calmness of that situation at that moment. Yes. What was your assessment, and what did it mean? That assessment really meant to every single black person who was sitting there, including those who are actually the French black people working inside France and their ministers. What signal did it send?
I've got to give a lot of kudos to the French education system, especially in how they train and prepare the diplomats and civil servants for service. I felt so much that everyone in the public sector within France who we interacted with had that decorum, had that calm, had that peace, had that ability. Even those who were even those who were officers of the law, making sure His Excellency was safe, even they had a level of diplomacy which was to write to a grandmother about.
There was no spanking off the stage.
No. And that's something that we can all learn. That's what I think we can learn from that. It's something that we in Africa as young people can learn from. It's something that we can teach kids as they're growing up and say, should we make sure kids learn more about the importance of diplomacy, decorum, and calmness? While not forgetting the importance of making our point heard. But also the importance of listening to someone else's point, allowing them to speak, allowing them to let it all out, to be calm, and then share also what we have to share, but let it be an exchange of ideas, an exchange of experiences, and an opportunity to then let bygones be bygones without forgetting them. And that's really interesting from that point of view. But it's something that not only us can learn from, it's something that also the French private sector can learn from. My prayer is that the French private sector also gets to learn that level of diplomacy and understanding and conversation that the French public sector is incredible at. We, the private sector in Africa, can learn from that. The private sector in France, that's French, can learn from that. The French private sector in Africa can definitely learn from that too. That was something else which we all need to go, take some 3 hours, you know, have some croissants, have a glass of Chateauneuf du Pape, have some, you know, raclettes if you're up in the hills and it's cold, and watch the whole 3.5 hours. It's a learning experience for each of us, whichever way we're looking at it, whether we're a young person, a multinational, or local Ugandan company. Definitely very, very crucial to look at it from all those points of view.
Wow. Peter, we're coming to the evening of our interview today, and I would just want to, first of all, say thank you very much, everybody who has been, you know, watching the program and sharing it far and wide. We also do know that sometimes it's difficult because of the internet in Africa and particularly in Uganda, you know, to the rest of the world, but we will continue to have the broadcast going on, and if you missed a part of it, it will definitely be running over and over for you to be able to catch and not miss any part, or even reconnect with the part that you've missed. And Peter, for me, is having this conversation with you gives a lot more enlightenment to what happened and the insight to what happened on the stage in France, in Montefiore that day, or in those days that you guys were there. And you had a number of people who came with you. Did you have a chance to actually sit down as a, you know, a delegation from Uganda to say, what can we learn from here? What can we do from here? Did you sort of like organize yourself to try and have a Ugandan caucus there, to try and engage some of these ministers of businesses to do this from a private sector point of view, as people invite in France, or it was business as usual? We do the conference, we all depart to our rooms, and then see you home.
What was very interesting there was you had groups that came on different days.
Yes.
And within those, you had, you know, a lot of support structures within us. We're really grateful to the Embassy of France in Uganda because they actually made sure we were okay all the way through. Even as we were making, you know, connections to other parts of Africa and to France, I think our connections within Uganda have been strengthened thanks to this. We all came from different parts of Uganda, from different walks of life, from different industries, and different age groups as well. But I felt this interesting gel forming, you know, from when we're trying to find out, oh, where can I find, you know, toothpaste, you know, or where can I find this, the other. But in this journey, our bonds have become even stronger. And there's so much that we've all learned from, you know, what to me and to others, I hope, was the pièce de résistance of His Excellency President Macron's speech. Another French term, which means the main course.
Yes.
And it came down to what he said in French, and I'll try to translate it to English, but what he said.
You can say it in French.
I'll say it in English. I'll say it in English. I'll say it in English because they can get it in French on the when they get the whole speech. But the challenge is, watch the speech, learn French, so that in 3 years' time you can listen to the whole speech in French. That's my challenge to people, especially everyone who went on delegation. Anyone who works for a French company, just learn French, please. But the meat of the matter was as follows, you know, or vegan meat if you don't eat meat, was France cannot look at its own future and really make it happen if it doesn't consider the Africa within it as well as the Africa without. That's the kind of message.
Repeat that again, Pete.
You know, for France to really look at its own future,
Yes.
it has to consider the Africa within and the Africa without. And it's got to consider the history. Be they joyous histories, or be they histories that could have been more joyous. That's my interpretation of what I heard as the meat of the matter, which was, we have all had a past. Let's be honest about that past. Let's each of us admit that past, but let's also acknowledge that and move forward. But remember that within us, there is a part of each other. What was big there to me was there is a part of Africa in France. And I don't mean an African as in terms of someone who looks African, but the Africanity. He used the word Africanity. There is an Africanity in France.
Yes.
And there is an Africanity in Africa. The same way, let's find that common core within all of us and build from there. And that's what I thought was amazing, because we all know that, you know, civilization became in Africa, you know, life started from here. So when you talk about the Africanity within, you're talking about the core, the building blocks, the beginning. You're talking about, in my opinion, the baby we are each born as. Yeah. And when we go back to that core, we will find the similarities within ourselves to build that brighter future and that more glorious tomorrow. And to paraphrase His Excellency's words again, you know, to make the planet better again.
Wow. Well, Peter, thank you very much, first of all, for this wonderful, you know, deliberation and the show this morning. And of course, this afternoon or this evening, depending on which part of the world you're actually watching the program from. I want to just take a few moments to just read before you close the show. Peter, I want to start from a gentleman here all the way in France. Eddie Okila, thank you very much for the show. Merci beaucoup. He's written many other things in France, but he says, I love that gentleman speaking French. It was nice to see some Ugandans actually attend this and pull on that. I've been looking forward, you know, to see how this will come to pass. I live and work in France. And it was a great joy for me to see that the Africans were in France and were beginning to talk about certain things that were never usually talked about. My joy and hope is that the Africans will take this seriously, and it's not just a political speech or a political stage or a platform, but we are actually able to leave this going forward and capitalize on this going forward. I think that it is important that a president of our time begins to lead a way, a new way of the world going forward. Macron, kudos.
Kudos indeed.
Yes. I have another gentleman here. Says, Eddie Okila, thank you very much. I followed the conference from there. I just felt like the delegation from Uganda didn't take much advantage of that. I did not see them engaging business communities there during the conference to actualize that to serious business. So I like the topic you brought. What does it mean for the creative industry? I think it's not just the creative industry. It should be for the production industry and put all of this. We have many companies from France working in Uganda. And can we have also these Ugandans build some multinational companies working in France? That way we'll begin to see the new Africa-France relationship as a reality. Wow, so people are actually taking this very serious. Yes. Peter, I want to read one from, a comment here from Kito Diallo says, thanks, Pete, for a great show. I have a question. France is known for exercising assimilation policy of colonialism, which seemingly was the best at benefiting Africans, where it saw many West Africans heading to France. Is this new French-Africa relationship another form of modern-day assimilation policy?
What I'd like to answer to my dear brother and say thank you so much, merci beaucoup, mon frère, is ultimately, when we look at something new, we look at what was old, we learn from it, and we build something better for the planet and for the future. So whatever challenges were there in the way things have been done before, or the way things may still be being done today in other areas, there is what we should learn from that. And he may have highlighted a few things as well, and I believe we shall learn from that. But what's interesting is, it's no longer a one-way street. I think we can all go online and Google and try to figure out how much French investment is there in Uganda. I speak for Uganda because I live here. I believe one will find that it is significant. one might find that it is so significant that it makes a difference. And one might also realize that there are enough Ugandan investments in Uganda that are sizable enough, and we had a few of them on our delegation. Massive entities that would hold their weight in terms of revenues anywhere in the world, be it in France or even in California. The point is, if a company from France can come to Uganda and help us overcome a few hiccups that we have in certain sectors where they have better experience, we also should consider, looking for opportunities to invest in places like France and other areas where we can build on our knowledge on this side to make a difference there. But more than that, take advantage of what he highlighted. Say, look, I'll go biblical maybe and go, kind of out of the lion's carcass, honey was found. Yeah. So if the history in West Africa could have been better, we can make it better now. Yeah. We could say, could a Ugandan company work through France to make a difference in West Africa? Yeah. Could it work the other way around? There are so many possibilities. Could a West African country, companies from West African country, go somewhere else and figure out how to better connect with a place like Uganda or Kenya or Tanzania? Yeah. There's a lot we can learn from each other. Yeah. There's a lot we must learn from each other. And there's a lot we need to learn from each other to actually move forward. Yeah. And not just look at the past as sadness, but look at the past not as something to be forgotten, not as something to only apologize for to make people feel better, but as building blocks for the future. Yeah. And no matter how bad what happened may have been, there is always a way to turn something around to make the most of that. Because if I'm to be very honest, I'll go, well, I talked earlier about going way back beyond 50 years and talking about the Roman Empire and other sort of things and so on. But even I look at just the last 50 to 100 years, I can now go to Côte d'Ivoire and do business because I speak French and because they speak French, right? Yeah. Someone from Côte d'Ivoire can come to Uganda and do business if they speak English because we speak English. Yeah. That's something worth thinking about. It's not all bad. Yeah. Of course, there may be a lot that could be made better, but that's what we have to start from. We say, look, it's not perfect, it's not incredible, but it doesn't mean it can't become incredible. Yeah. It doesn't mean it can't become better. It doesn't mean we can't turn a new page and build a new future and write a new novel, as the head of state said. Write a new novel and make it even more joyous.
Wow. Thank you very much, Peter. I just want to read one more, comment from here as we close the show. And this is really a very interesting one. It's sort of like a comment. It says, Eddie Okila, thank you very much. I hope that we can continue with this conversation for the next couple of days. What I'm really very much particularly interested in, I'm in the art industry, and you're talking about what does it mean for the creative industry in Uganda. Creative industry in Uganda already doesn't have very good policies to be able to help it foster to go beyond borders. And that's something that we need to look into. But it doesn't mean that everything is doom and gloom. What we're really interested in mostly is to see that this thing that France is actually talking about is a new reality of how people begin to view Africa going forward. What I'm interested in going forward is to see how this conversation you've started on this platform with these people will end. But more especially, I want to see that this is not lip service, it's a reality that can be lived and can be practiced and can be tried and tested. This is the only time France has got to prove itself right from many other countries that have always talked about their heart being for Africa, but they do something different. We've had China talk about Russia and China saying that trade with Africa, but the trading has not been balanced. The Chinese trading in Africa is almost one-way street, is not a two-way street. Can France live its promise that a new Africa can be born Great, words from Mr. Peter Nyeko, and a shout out to him. And I have a question to Mr. Peter Nyeko. He speaks French very well, seemingly. Can he tell us whether he was able to get a sense of truth from the French people? Because sometimes they can be deceptive. Peter, I think you are now becoming like the Messiah on the French things. I mean, you've had the question coming from my friend Peter right there. Peter is into creative arts industry, particularly is a painter.
Awesome.
Yes, he's a paint artist, and he said he's sold. I know he has sold many of his art and craft to the French people. I mean, back in the days when I was still very active, I used to be the best MC for the creative arts in Uganda. At some point, we tried to lead a campaign to raise money to build the National Museum for the creative industry in Uganda. And then that was led by Roberta from Germany, and of course Carol Bodner from Germany as well. And I think there was another gentleman from France whose name I forgot. But that was the discussion. So this relationship has been going on for some time. So Peter has of course benefited from some of this. But then again, everybody is saying, is this something that is going to be a reality? Perhaps we'll bring, people from the French embassy, the director, and maybe even at some point just, put the French ambassador onto the bench here to basically have this conversation. Is it true? Is it going to be a reality? I wouldn't mind actually, having a conversation with the president himself to say, this is what we want to understand this from the Ugandan perspective. Does this mean it's going to be a reality? But over to you, Peter, as we wind up. And
Awesome.
then when you give us that, Peter, we also want to give us the last 3 things that summarizes what you have said today, that of what this summit actually really means for the creative industry. Please
Awesome.
dive into it.
So great. I believe it's real. You can always look at something based not only about what it's spoken, but what has been done. We all know it is a fact that France has really supported the Ugandan creative industry, going way, way back.
Yeah.
Sadly for me as a Ugandan, much more than us as Ugandan business people have, even though we have the ability to. We're learning from France how to appreciate our own. Yeah. We're learning from France how to appreciate Ugandan art and so that's that. So it's already been happening. The fact that a new page is being turned to make it even more interesting and involve us even more in that conversation allows for reflection and gives a lot of hope. It's, I speak the way I speak for many reasons, probably because I'm thinking in Luo and speaking in English, but at the end of the day, when I translated to France, and what I was hearing, when I was there, it's a fact that there is a way forward. The work really right now, at least coming on from the summit, is for each of us, 300 plus who went from around Africa, strangely enough, a huge percentage of that from Uganda. That's another point to think about. If there are 300 and there are 22 from Uganda, Uganda must probably have some form of interest,
significance. Yeah,
yes, and and I mean I do understand.
That's a conversation for another show altogether.
And that's why what does that mean? It means, in my opinion, each of those 22 had something to share with France and something to share with the other African delegates there, which is special about them and special about Uganda that the world needs. Yeah. Each of those 22 who went needs to ask themselves, why me? Why Uganda? What is it that I had to share out there? And what is it that I can still share to make the world a better place and give honor to Uganda? We shouldn't think about it in terms of saying, what do we get from France or what will France give us? No, I believe it's the other way around. I believe it was what France could give us. Yeah. France would just fly in, right? But if you go there and have that conversation, there is something you have to say. There's something which you have to share. There's something which you can do in some industries, more than one person was on the delegation. And I'd say reflect upon that. What does that mean for the opportunities for your businesses in France, in French-speaking West Africa? There is so much to build on from this. And we, from the business sector, have so much to learn from our colleagues in the arts, because they've gone far, right? They've been able to take African art and make it global. Now, can we take African business and make it global the way African art has gone global? Can we take African education global the way they have taken African music global? Can we take African innovation global the way they have taken African sport global? You see what I mean right there?
Yeah.
That's what that conversation was happening in there. And it was as honest and as raw as it could possibly be. And I still applaud our hosts for being gracious and allowing each of us to express what was not just at the tip of our tongue, but deep within our souls. Grâce à France. Merci beaucoup et merci à tous.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you very much, everybody, for coming to the program today and for making Creative Industry Talk a beautiful place to be. And we're looking forward to having a series of this conversation going. Peter, we want to say thank you very much. It's we spread love here to the rest of the world. We probably do it one more time. We have to spread love here to everyone in the world. Until next week, Creative Industry has come to an end. Okila, engineer Peter, Benhur, Nyeko, right here, talking about the Neo Africa France Summit 2021. What does it mean for the creative industry in Africa, in East Africa, and particularly down here in Uganda? Until then, stay hooked.
Merci beaucoup et au revoir.
Like I said, I'm still learning. I don't think I'm ready to be a CEO yet.
Yes.
Well, so for me, I could say bring the perspective of someone who has gone through the challenges.
Yeah.
And like I said, I've been on the side of someone that needs to get their documents.
Yeah.
And I've also been on the verification end.
Yeah.
So I really understand the pain points from a personal perspective. And I think for me, that's what drives me.
Yeah.
Because I know that challenge.
Yeah.
I've been there.
Yeah.
And that basically drives me to push, drives me to better explain, what the product does. Because sometimes, even when you get into spaces, people just think, oh, you've just got this product, you don't understand what it does, you don't really understand the challenges. But as someone who understands the challenges, I'm able to better explain what the product brings on the table from a personal perspective. So I think that's been a success. And the fact that we have managed to get partners here is a huge, huge success. It's a huge success. When something is new, it's very difficult for people to hop onto it. And if people get onto it, sometimes it's usually for the wrong reasons. But when you actually find people that that believe in it, that want to work with you to keep improving it, that want to work with you to keep having that feedback to improve the product, it is a big, big plus. It's a big, big plus because you could build a product, put so much time and money into it, and it's not used by anyone.
Wow. Which we have seen before.
It's a reality.
Yeah.
But the fact that, our product is out there and it is changing lives, because for us, that's the end goal. Yes, money is important in business, but we also want to change lives. We also want to meet challenges, and that is also our end goal. And seeing our product out there and doing what it's supposed to do is my oh my.
Wow.
It's a success.
Wow.